All right. So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another Iowa Learning Farms webinar. My name's Elena Whitaker, and I'm the Water and Conservation Educator with Iowa Learning Farms. Today, we're joined by Mason Burkhart with the Center for Ag Law and Taxation here at Iowa State, and he's going to be talking about estate and succession planning for the farm. If you have any questions throughout his presentation today, go ahead and submit them to the chat and we will get them answered at the end. But without further ado, take it away, Mason.
Thanks. Well, thanks everyone for logging on, and thanks for Learning Farms for having me on here today. So as Elena said, my name is Mason Burkhart. I'm an attorney over here at the Center for Ag Law and Taxation. We work through the extension budget, and we're over here in Curtis Hall as part of the Ag department, kind of oversees us as well. So um, let me get. There we go. So my contact info, I'll share the slides with Elena afterwards. Obviously, these are recorded, so if you need to go back through and get a hold of me, you can, or you can search the ISU Center for Ag Law and Tax and get a hold of me if you have any further questions. Because this presentation is going to be general to appeal to everyone who's listening, and we can kind of get a little bit more in depth with you guys individually if needed. Today's focus, okay, we're going to go through the things everyone should consider. It is tailored toward farm, but I know we have some other agribusiness professionals in here other than just farmers. So you can take a lot of these lessons and kind of tailor them to what you have going on, what your assets are, and things like that. So all in all, this should hopefully be really helpful information for everybody on the things to think about and a couple different options you have, what buckets you can put different assets and different money into, okay? The big thing, right, that we want to focus on today is we want to preserve family harmony. Everyone's got a horror story of a cousin of theirs or even in their own family of grandpa passing away, mom, dad passing away, and then you end up with a fragmented family, right? That's one of the big things that when we talk to people that we are trying to avoid. Preserve the land is an obvious goal, right? And then as well as preserve the estate and business assets as well. And then really providing opportunities to the next generation. I will plug, we have a fairly new program here within our center called the Beginning Farmer Center. There's a lot of resources there if you have grandchildren or young children leaving Iowa State or maybe an associate's degree program in ag that can help everyone kind of with that transition what we're going to do. There's a ton of resources on there. I would definitely check that out. Moving past the plug for our materials, we're going to start first off with setting some goals and getting a team. Okay. The biggest thing that you can take away from this is what your goals are. And then I really do think a strong team matters. If you want to reach out to the center later, we have certain rules. We can't tell you exactly who to go see, but we can float you a couple of good names of people you can get that I've worked with privately, some CPAs that Christine, our director here, has worked with, and kind of guide you into assembling a team, right? But without planning, we lose a bunch of options. Okay, guys. I mean, you can read the slide. I'm going to just move on to let's get the team. Okay. The team you're going to need a lawyer and a tax specialist. Sometimes those are the same person, sometimes those are different people. When I was practicing, I worked with a CPA specifically, and he and I would meet along with a financial planner from Raymond James or Edward Jones. I had a couple, and we would kind of formulate a plan based on what the assets of the individual were, right? Everyone's different, but you definitely need to get a team together in order to give you the advice you need. And really the tax specialist, as much as being an attorney myself, the tax specialist, I think, is the most key to have someone you're comfortable with. I'm sure you guys work with the same people. Uh, as long as they know what's going on, I would recommend using them in your team maybe, and then finding an attorney that works for you. Uh, because as we know, tax laws are changing all of the time, and there's some significant burdens if we plan things incorrectly. So to get started, okay, we make the first appointment, we assemble the team, and I'm going to kind of fly through here. This is some base stuff I think a lot of you know about property ownership types, okay? So the big thing we will need to know is we need to start at square one. How are all of your assets owned when we're looking at your overall portfolio on the farm, right? Joint tenancy, as most of you would know, I think, is the most common, right? That's where when you pass away, the wife will get it all. Vice versa is kind of generally how that goes. You'll also hear joint tenancy with rights of survivorship. That right of survivorship is what we're talking about, where when you pass away without filing a new deed, the ownership interest 100% automatically transfers to the other person. Usually they're marital deeds. They don't have to be, right? I mean, you can own in joint tenancy with anyone. Again, it's very uncommon because your family unit wouldn't benefit if you own it, say, with a friend or a brother or something. They would end up with 100%, right? So, um, in some states, there's a presumption, okay, and in Iowa, we are one of those. If you're a husband and wife and the deed language is a little wishy-washy, they're going to assume it's joint tenancy. Um, the example is pretty clear there. When the home is titled in joint tenancy and Robert dies, Rebecca would become the owner. I'm not going to beat a dead horse there. I think most people attending this would know what joint tenancy would be. Really, with joint tenancy, the basis for federal estate tax is really the only thing that kind of gets in the way. Um, the gross estate of the spouse who passes first, you receive no real stepped up basis if it's a joint tenant relationship, which is different than tenant in common. Okay. Um, let's go through here. I kind of want to get out of joint tenancy. Sorry, tenancy in common. Tenancy in common, there's a presumption for that with share and share alike, split equally, right? You got to be careful. This is one thing I experienced in practice that a lot of people don't think about. If you have a 120-acre tract, this is a great example, everyone. Um, and you would like to split it up in equal 40s for each child to receive, so there is none of the risk of them not getting along and you're being fair. We need to make sure that we word the will, if you're having a will, specifically to be distributed as you see fit. So, um, in Iowa, you have a right to a partition. Um, Automatically, okay, if you are a joint owner to anything. And that, by extension, creates a lot of conflict, right? Usually, the more kids in the mix, one of them wants to sell, wants to get the wants to get really the cash out of the asset. And then they file that partition. It ends up, if there's any sort of strife or anything, the courts are going to order that partition. So we need to be really careful when we plan for your ownership, how you leave it. Then to this point of this section of the PowerPoint, we need to understand exactly how you own that property as well, right? Do you have a 1/3 interest you'd be passing on to your members? What does that look like? Or do you own the 40 on the eastern side and we aren't worried about your siblings or cousins or whoever it was left to you with, right? Um, Generally, cooperation is required, and I would really discourage leaving things as tenant in common, even if your children get along, right? It just adds a real issue to what's going on. Sorry, I'm going to open the chat real quick. John, I saw your question right here with percentages that stay within the farm. There is a number to that. We actually have that somewhere in our materials. I wonder if I can get your email if you want to. I don't know if you want to drop that in the chat or you want to email me. We actually have a little slideshow over that, and I can send you that when we're done. It's a large amount every year passes from family member to family member. I believe it's somewhere in the high 80s, low 90s. But you do get into situations where really it's second or third generation and it keeps getting halved, quartered, right? And you get to a point where someone's inheriting 40 acres and they live in Cedar Rapids and it's down in Corning. What are they going to do with that? There's not a lot of margin for them to cash rent that out, and that's where you usually see a lot of the siblings end up selling. Not so much that they don't want to farm, but it's just segmented down uh, to the point no one really feasibly can. And usually that is when they've gone to cash rent at some point, and there's no active farming operation. Um, yeah, and another pitfall of tenants in common is that anyone can sell their interest. So you could have to own the parcel with a stranger, and you want to make decisions, related to putting down chemicals for next year, and they want to do something different. Could they file a silly lawsuit against you for some sort of damages? Sure, right? I mean, they wouldn't be successful, but there's a whole can of worms there if you own it with someone you don't know. Um, Federal estate tax rules for tenants in common, right? Each of you, when you pass away, would be on your death toward the federal estate tax, which is the new limit is 13.99. So most of you, I would assume, wouldn't um, have any issues with that, but maybe you do, right? Your gross amount would be attributable to you at death. So whatever in the last example we had of the 120, where the three siblings each had a common interest of a third, the value of about 40 acres would be attributed to you on your passing, right? There's an example there that says as much, right? We'll go through this one. Veronica and her sister own 100 acres of farmland. They inherited the land from their father when it was worth 3,000 an acre. In 2025, the land is worth 12,000. Veronica dies. Veronica's 50% undivided interest in the 100-acre parcel is passed to her two daughters through her will. Each daughter now has 25% of undivided interest. The key benefit here is they do get a stepped up basis to the new value of the land. Veronica's daughters do. Okay. But Veronica's sister's share until she passes is still at 150,000. Okay. Partition by sale generally. Okay. Partition in kind, you will see in the state of Iowa, it is the only time it's favored is in a probate proceeding generally, when they are trying to divide the land as equally as possible. Partition in kind, the risk there is in Iowa, you get what's called a referee that is appointed. And the referee generally presents the court with a couple different options of how to partition the land fairly. The risk there for your heirs, if you're leaving land to them as in your will as tenants in common, um, it's never really fair, is it? You know, you could have a 40-acre tract that has 10 acres of the best land and 30 acres of junk. And you could have one that's 40 acres of so-so. And in value, are they about the same? Sure. But are they the same in utility? No, right? So partition in kind, if you leave, it'll leave your land to your children to be tenants in common, I think is innately unfair, right? And I would suggest against that. Um, Going forward. Okay, so you got this fancy little picture right here of Thanksgiving. Don't do tenancy in common. I promise you guys, your legacy, your children won't talk to each other once you're gone. It just creates a whole set of issues. And that's really, anything. For any of you out there that don't maybe have a farm, but you have a Morton building you run your business out of, or a small space on Main Street you bought back in the day, uh, you know, make sure that you talk to whoever's doing your estate planning and come up with a plan to avoid tenancy in common. Put some other language in there Maybe the kids are joint tenants, which creates strife, but maybe the direction is just to liquidate the property and sell the asset is your desire, right? But put it in a trust, which we'll get to, but tenancy in common is about as bad, bad of an option as you can get. And I just wouldn't recommend that. Uh, Payable on death. Here's a really easy thing to do to make sure that you maximize your children's inheritance, okay? On any equities account, IRA, anything that you have, even savings accounts, and some banks do checking accounts. It's bank by bank on checking accounts. Most do savings. You can put a pay on death beneficiary or a transfer on death beneficiary. That means the same thing, okay? That asset then transfers by contract law. So it doesn't have to go through probate and the fees of probate if you do a pay on death beneficiary. And it doesn't have to be transferred into the trust to then have kind of the hassle, maybe not the cost, but the hassle of administrating that money through the trust when you're gone. You can just walk in if you haven't already, ask to do the pay on death form, and my four kids, 25% equal. All they have to do is follow up with that institution with a death certificate, right? And then at that point, the contract law will take over, and that is maximizing your money. If you can put a pay on death beneficiary on it, that should be priority one. Just do it. It's the easiest thing in the world. It's one piece of paper generally, and it gets your children, grandchildren, whoever you leave things to, brother, sister, uncle, charity. It gets them the money as soon as possible, and it gets them the most of it of any options. Okay. There's a quick example here. Um, we don't have the answer, I guess. I'm not going to read through that one. The point is if you don't put a pay on death beneficiary, it goes to the estate, guys. Okay. Or to, well, it goes to the estate. So if you have a trust and you forget to put the pay on death beneficiary as the estate, we're opening a whole probate action and all the cost with it for just that policy's money, right? And that's worst case scenario. Okay. If you didn't have a trust anyway, not a huge deal. We're probably opening an estate either way. But that goes into the estate and it goes to the 2% fee your lawyer will take, a potential 2% fee that the executor will take, whether they're a family member or not. In your will, you can say that they can or can't have one, but if it's mute, I promise you they'll take one, as well as it's 0.02% um, that will be going to court costs. Okay. So all of that money, instead of just transferring on contract with the simple showing of um, a death certificate, uh, now has a whole bunch of fees and is tied up for a year until we get far enough into the probate court proceedings. Okay. Life estate. Right. I mean, that was a lot more commonly used, I would say, in my experience from 20, 30 years ago, right? Dad inherited the land, dad keeps it as solo ownership, but gives mom a life estate before it passes on to son and daughters, right? That's kind of what we're talking about. Um, the property then passes to what they call the remainderman, right? So that I don't think is anything news to anyone. But in case you want a quick rundown, right? The life tenant can pretty much do whatever they need to do business as normal, as if they owned it. If you're farming it, you can put drainage in, you could cash rent it out yourself, you can do whatever you need to do, and your tenant farmer could do whatever they needed to do. The remainderman can't do a whole lot other than maybe sue if there's a challenge to what they call wasting the property, essentially not taking care of it at all and just ruining its commercial and economic value. All right. They can lease it, issues. Um, with a retained life estate, here's an interesting thing. The basis step up. With a granted, it does not step up. So we have an example here. Grandpa passed away in 89. Farmland valued at $100,000. Okay. Through his will, he gave grandma a life estate. In 2025, grandma dies, and Madge and Carl are the remainder interest holders. Okay. The property wasn't in grandma's estate, and so Carl and Madge inherit the land with a basis of $100,000, even though now it's worth $1 million. So what does that mean? When grandpa passed away, that's where the step up in basis for value happened, right? Okay. So when grandpa passed away, we did step up his basis maybe from 12,000 to 100,000, right? Um, but when grandma passes away, the step up in basis happened on Grandpa's death. So the remaindermen there are kind of handcuffed. When they go to sell this property, now you're going to have quite a big capital gains issue there, right? We're going to have to 1031. We're going to have to come up with a plan. That's enough of a raise in value that an installment contract would be very long to get around that, but something along those lines, right? So that's a thing to keep in mind as well, that life estates may be good here and there, but they can kind of get you into a capital gains issue as well. Okay. So here we get into how will the property transfer at death? And I'm trying to be quick here, guys. I promise. I want to leave room for questions. This is the meat and potatoes, and I'm going to kind of fly through some of the basic stuff here. But two forms of probate succession: no will and testacy, which the Iowa Code lays out how property is passed through intestacy, and then will, right? You choose within reason and within the laws of Iowa how you want to leave the land behind. In Iowa, we have a spousal elective share. That's a good thing for everyone to know, okay? About a third of the property in Iowa, whether you leave your spouse in your will or not, they have a right to, okay? You can waive that in a prenup, but that's a good thing to know. If you're on a second or third wife without a prenup and you think, well, I'm just going to leave her only cash or nothing, you can sort of dictate what those assets are going to be, sure, but you need to hope that they're a third of the value in order to be safe. If your land is the bulk of what you're worth, she is entitled by elective share to receive a third, uh, roughly, or what values a third of the whole estate, and whatever land would be necessary to make that happen. Okay, he or she. I'm saying she's, and I shouldn't do that, but that's the reality there. Um, some states, don't enforce prenups. Some states do post-nuptial agreements. Iowa does not. So it's a little too late. If you didn't do it on the front end, tough. Assets distributed outside of probate, we kind of covered that. Pay on death, transfer on death. Um, Anything with a designation, right? That's really what we're talking about. Joint tenants with right of survivorship can transfer without it. And then life insurance as well. Okay. So the benefits of probate, assets are given without liens and debts detached. Before we can pay anything out, the estate, being we, right, has to cover all of that with any cash that was available or sell any assets to cover the debts and liens. So there's really no clouds on the title or anything, and people receiving things can know they're taking everything on without any of those issues. Um, that's really the big benefit. There's not a ton of tax benefits, really, guys. Burdens of probate is fees. Okay. So when I was a private attorney, even up to 6 months ago, I'm fairly new over here. Okay. 2% fee of the total value is the max. Every attorney, at least within an hour of Des Moines or an hour of Cedar Rapids in a big golden circle, right? They're going to do the max 2% fee. And the reason they wrote that, it's kind of a socialist idea, is the poor people who don't have enough, their estates will be picked up by people because they can balance it with the wealthy estates that they received, right? The attorneys doing the work. And so that's kind of the thought process behind that. So if you're only worth $200,000, it's kind of a good deal. If you're worth $2 billion, that's a lot of money for doing the same amount of work for both, right? Which is why we have trusts. Okay. Trusts, for wealthy individuals can minimize tax liability. Now, that's going to get into some specifics. I'll try to answer any questions you guys may have. But without looking at your portfolios, that's kind of tough. The big thing they do is we don't have to do probate. The trust is the owner, right? You designate a successor trustee, okay? You guys would likely be the trustees while you're living. Your trust document will say when I'm gone, so and so is the manager of the trust. And we would put terms in there if the trust is going to terminate or if it's going to continue, and so on and so forth. So you can kind of control things beyond death. A lot of them that I have done, though, is that the trust just has, upon my death, this will automatically terminate. Here's what you're going to do. And we do that, but we don't have to have the 2% fee or go through the courts to get the authority, right? You die without a trust, the authority to move assets is given through the court system, and that will allow financial institutions to clear title and turn cash over. If they belong to the trust, you don't need that process, right? There's a living or testamentary trust. Testamentary is the will. You have a will that creates the testamentary trust with whatever's left over after your estate. A living trust is kind of what we just talked about. Okay. Um, you're going to manage assets. I mean, really, what you're going to do day to day with regular trust is kind of just live your life. Testamentary trust, you usually have a special needs child or a spendthrift trust, a child who's maybe in and out of jail with problems, and you can't trust them to control their money, or they're going to leverage all the money you left behind to a bunch of creditors on a bunch of cool ATVs, and they don't have the money for that. So you're doing a testamentary trust where you don't really need one day to day, but you need to sort of control the money for who you're giving it to. A revocable living trust is kind of that day-to-day trust I was talking about, where your house will own it, your checkbook will say living trust, and then when you pass away, we'll disseminate property uh, as it's set up. And I'm trying to hurry because I know we're getting to the question portion, and I apologize, everybody. I'm sure I'm talking a little too fast, but I want to get you this info and really get you these slides so that way, if there's anything, you can go rewatch and read and get what you need. Okay. These are often called will substitutes. This is kind of all the things we have broken down about putting the terms in there that you want the property to disseminate under after you're gone. Okay. It immediately becomes irrevocable when you die, right? So we can't change it. You can change it while you're living, right? That's why it's revocable. And you can leave new assets to new people, bring assets in and out, whatever you need to do. But when you pass away, it's law, right? Essentially, not actually, but stick with me there. New trustees take control, uh, and we go forward, whether we're going to distribute assets or if the trust is going to kind of continue as almost a business entity. All right. It's administered outside of probate. All of those benefits I've kind of already touched on, right? Issues. It costs more money to set it up, point blank, and you're going to have two different tax entities. The trust is going to have a different set of taxes than you personally. So you're doubling your yearly tax charges, if you will. You're still going to have to file as an individual on anything that's personal income, which would be your retirement accounts that are going to stay in your own name. Anything through any LLC holdings that you get paid on, so on and so forth. So there's a double tax charge and it costs more money on the front end. It'll cost a couple $1,000s to get this set up. Anywhere from three if you don't have a lot of assets to, endless, 10 or 15. Um, sorry, I heard a bang, but that's not from this chat. Um, trust, don't generally have court supervision, right? And that's another benefit. We can kind of just do what you want to do without getting too many people involved. Funding the trust, you need to work with that team we get you, but essentially, as a baseline rule, everything you own individually, you're going to want to put in that trust. All right. Irrevocable trusts are pretty rare. Once you put things in there, you can't really take things back out, but sometimes it keeps things away from Medicaid or if you're dying and I had one I managed, the wife was passing away of cancer in her 40s and had a ton of money and knew he would eventually get remarried, but didn't really want her to benefit. So she created an irrevocable spousal trust where it paid money to him and then by extension to the new wife as well. But the new wife couldn't really benefit too much on that money. And then after the husband passed away, it actually paid to their grandkids. So it never became the husband's money, right? That's a really clear example. And then you have charitable trust as well, which you leave it to charity and it kind of isn't taxed. All right. Business entities, I'm going to fly through this. You should generally all have business entities for your farms. A lot of you might still be doing general partnership. You may want to meet with someone and explore getting out of that. And a lot of people are still C Corps back from the 70s and 80s when that was advantageous, and now they're kind of stuck in those spots. But usually it's an LLC these days, where we have kind of the land holding bucket and the operating bucket if you're going to use LLCs. You should always have an operating LLC, but you can use a trust or an LLC both maybe for your land holdings, okay? And the control there is a buy-sell agreement within your operating agreement of the LLC. You can dictate kind of who can purchase, rights of first refusal, deadlines, things like that. Okay. Income tax considerations, right? When you're selling your assets, if you're getting out of farming, you depreciate the machinery. It creates a unique problem, okay, with your tax bill and what you're going to have on capital gains and income taxes. All right. So selling assets, again, this is supposed to be a short series and I'm already over time, so we're not going to get too deep into it. But if you had about a $6 million sale, you're looking about a $1.5 million tax bill. Okay. If you hold assets till death, you get that stepped up basis right. Your family does on everything. Okay. So this goes back to maybe a trust isn't the answer because a trust will take it at the basis of when you put it in, okay, or when you purchased it individually. And the trust will own it. So you don't get this stepped up basis benefit like you do if you pay the 2% fee for probate. But then everyone gets it at the new basis if they go to sell it right after you die, and there's really no taxable gain there because they got that stepped up basis, okay? Gifting the assets, that's pretty run of the mill. You can give up to 38,000 if you're married, 19,000 if you're single per year. Um, um, Without having to file a gift return. That gift return, you don't pay taxes on it now. It goes towards your 13.99 million net worth if federal income tax is going to apply. That confuses some people, but you can give a gift without a tax penalty. And as long as you aren't flirting around the $14 million mark, it's not going to affect you too greatly. Everyone kind of knows of like kind exchanges, 1031s to avoid some income tax, right? I'm not going to go too far over that. You can use farm income averaging to get around some sale of assets. Talk with your CPAs if that would apply to you. Okay. Gonna fly through some of these. Installment sales, as we all know, right? You can kind of break up that income coming in um, over the future years and you maybe get lower rates, or say you want smaller tracts of property, you can maybe do a couple different 1031s over time instead of trying to find multiple 1031s to send to this giant hulk of money all the way around, right? Charitable remainder trust, okay? Charitable remainder trust, the trust benefits you while you're alive. Once you're gone, it goes to charity. You don't pay taxes, capital gains taxes on the conversion of your assets, okay? Till you pay the money out, and then the charities never do, right? So when you take distributions like an annuity, you will pay taxes when you take it out, okay? When you die and you give it to charity, then the charity will just receive the money without the taxes. So it's a way to kind of get out of paying some capital gains or worrying about federal, estate taxes. But you can't leave it to family. It actually has to be charity, and it can't be a trust you set up for the benefit of someone else, like a charity, like for my wife to give her charity. That doesn't work. It's got to be like Salvation Army, right? Um, word of rental agreements, everyone kind of knows this. Business entities, just let's make sure we put in the terms to how we're going to pass property on. Okay, you can give shares to your children right through your operating agreement. If it's mom, your shares will then go into your state and be disseminated from there. Estate and gift tax rules. I'm going to kind of fly through this because I want to get to your questions. Okay. Again, 14 million a person for that to really come into play. For a lot of you, it won't. If it's going to come into play for you, I hope to goodness you already have a team. If you don't, please reach out to me because we need to get you into a structure of a trust or something like that to avoid this becoming an issue because it's about 40%, right? That rate. I mean, it's a tough hit and we'll have an operation almost. So we need to make sure we have a team for you. Okay. Here's an interesting chart, kind of related to John's question from earlier, but not really. Less than 0.5% actually have federal estate taxes that are owed. Like Iowa, Minnesota, a lot of us have non-corporate farming bills, right? Protections from corporate farms, and those are working. Okay, I do want to share that, right? I mean, most of us aren't getting to that level. And if you are, congratulations. Please get a team, okay? There's some other income tax things, gift cash, portability, there's the 40% I brought up. Annual gifting, I already touched base on that. That is, you can give that amount to any person in the calendar year without any issue. So you could give 10 people 38,000 and not have any issues. You just can't give it one person 38,000 or 39,000 and a dollar. Okay. Iowa, we don't have inheritance taxes. So if you lived this long, congratulations. We just phased them out. You're not going to have any state inheritance tax if you live in Iowa or on it, and your estate is administrated here. Okay. And then other key planning documents. All right. Get a financial POA. Okay, for emergencies to make sure that the operation can keep going. Healthcare, of course, you should have that, right? I mean, you need to designate one of your children or a close confidant to make sure that if your ability lacks, especially if you're the only spouse left, that someone can make decisions who you trust. Living will is about life-saving procedures, and then HIPAA release. Those three things, the Iowa bar came out, they're all on one form now. You sign 3 times and you're taken care of. Okay. Failure to plan all the scary things. All right. Storing documents, keep them in a safe place, right? Living will can be kept at your doctor's office, healthcare POAs. Um, have them on file at your doctor's office, but also give the paper copy to whoever those people are. And financial ones, your bank will want to keep a copy anyway. Okay, I went a little long on my speaking part and I apologize, but I wanted to make sure those slides were available for everyone. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you, Elena, and then you tell
Yeah.
me where we go from here.
Perfect. So, yes, if you have questions, go ahead and keep submitting them. I just have a few slides to go through really quick. Mason, if you want to click
I'm
to
going to
the
answer
next.
some in the chat or read these ones in the chat and see if I can.
Yeah, if you could just go to the next slide though, really quick, we'll do some of those slides I
Absolutely.
sent, and then we'll head to some of the questions. So if you're watching today and you would like a CCA CEU, go ahead and email me at alenaw@iastate.edu by the end of today at 5 p.m. with your name, the name you entered to watch the webinar if it's different, and then your CCA number. So go ahead and send those to me by 5 o'clock today. Next slide, please.
Yes, sorry.
If you are attending one of our webinars for the first time this year and you'd like to fill out a voluntary demographic survey, you can find it by scanning that QR code or going to iowalearningfarms.org/survey. Again, this is a voluntary demographic survey if you'd like to fill it out. Next slide. Next week, if you want to join us, Luciano Alves de Oliveira from University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, will be talking about dissolved nitrous oxide in subsurface drainage, the impacts of nitrogen management and cover crops in Illinois corn systems. So that looks to be a really interesting webinar, and I hope a lot of you come back for that. And then just one last slide here really quick. This webinar and all of our previous webinars have been recorded and are archived. You can find them on our website, iowalearningfarms.org/webinars, or we've got a YouTube channel, Iowa Learning Farms webinars, where you can find them sorted by year and also by topic. If you want to learn everything you want to know about cover crops, we have those all listed in a playlist there and things like that. So, getting to some of the questions, we've got a few starting off here about revocable trusts. So, one person is saying that they're in the middle of writing a revocable trust to pass on the farm to their child. Do I'm assuming meaning like the ISU Center for Ag Law and Taxation, do you guys review trust documents before they are signed? And also, is the revocable trust the best tool when someone owns farmland in two different states?
Okay, so I see that's from Gary. Gary, good questions. We here are not able to, and sorry, my camera's over here and I'm reading them over there. So let me look over here. Um, we are not able to practice law in the center because we are a non-profit center and therefore we fall outside of insurance. So we have kind of different rules, the attorneys over here. I can't read over yours for you and make changes or really say like here's a well-written thing. What I can do is if you want to call and kind of talk over and maybe read through and just ask me some general questions, I can probably allude to some things that are missing. But I got to be careful how far I take it. If you're really concerned, there's always, I mean, it's more money, of course, Gary, but you can always get a second attorney's opinion. And you don't even really have to tell the first one, right? Hey, first one wrote this. I think it's pretty good. You seem to be an expert, and I can give you resources to people who are. Will you go over this and see if they're missing anything? Um, and then feel comfortable. You definitely want to feel comfortable. It's worth the money on the front end. As far as farmland in two states, it will make it simpler. Yes, when you're gone, it'll make it a lot faster because the trust will have the authority in either state to retitle the land if needed, or I'm assuming if you have land in two states, I shouldn't assume, maybe you're on the border, but potentially you have a tenant on some land you own in a different state if it's a good ways away. The the trustee you appoint will already right away have capacity to re-execute contracts if needed or anything like that. If you do pass away, you can open an estate in either state, and then in the other state, you open what's called an ancillary estate. Um, and it doesn't really add to fees because it's that flat 2%, but it's going to take a long time. It's going to take a year and a half, 2 years for your estate as a whole, maybe not the land conveyance, but it's going to take a long time to get that moved. So a trust is definitely going to be the most efficient.
Cool. There's another question about revocable trusts. They're saying if the land is owned in the revocable trust by both spouses and the first spouse dies, the assets in the trust don't receive a partial step up. They're wondering that.
Correct.
And is there an election or should they have two separate trusts?
So you can do two separate trusts for that reason. You can to get the step up basis for the land that's contained. Um, well, So that's a complicated question. If you already have it or you're putting into the trust, the basis is whatever the value was when you put it into the trust, and that's one of the drawbacks of trust, okay? So if you and your wife have already put it into a trust, the basis is always going to be, unless you pull it back out of that trust, what it was when you bought it. You don't get that stepped up basis in a trust, period, okay? So that's important to know. What you can do, though, is you can have two different um, wills that create testamentary trust that have language like, I fund my testamentary trust, which goes to support my other spouse, to the maximum values allowed under the federal tax rules, right? And you can get a step up in basis for about 50% of the property there, right? Because they're generally half owners. And you can get kind of that stepped up basis then, and maybe that testamentary trust gives you the power to sell, and you can benefit that way through a trust. Um, but you're not, if it's already in a trust, you kind of surrender that right to the step up basis for the efficiency of administration and being able to control the assets more. Um, I hope that answers what you're asking. If not, follow up in the chat box. Or again, my email's at the front. That's a pretty complicated thing, and maybe you want to send me a quick email, a little more specifically to your situation, and then I can kind of give better advice.
Okay, there's another question asking, is there a list and even like a state by state list of all the lawyers that are good at farm estate law? And does it have like specifically even then like a little review of lawyers and stuff like that? But do lists like that exist?
So they do, but here's the insider baseball, and I think I see that's from Vicky. Okay, Vicky, I was a private attorney until a couple months ago. We pay to be on those lists. We pay to be on them. We can give a little list here. What I would say too, if you want to know an expert in the area, make sure they're not working for a university like me, generally as like a professor. But if you search lawyers, continuing ed is called CLE. You type in like Iowa Trust and Estate Planning CLE, ours will come up, others will come up. Look at the attorneys that are with a firm who are teaching those courses. Because what does that mean? That means that guys like me are going in to learn from them. And that is probably the best way outside of just reaching out to us or going off of friends of friends. That is the easiest way to kind of learn who the cornerstones of those areas are and who's good or who's not. Because anyone that we have teach here, I mean, we vet them like the Dickens, right? We go through them, they give us a sample like I am to you. They teach a fake course, and then we go, oh, okay, he knows what he's talking about, and we put him on there. So there's a couple even on our website that teach stuff like this that I would highly recommend, and that's probably half of who I would send you as a list anyway. Okay, but those lists you find online, best lawyers, Trial Lawyers of America, yada, yada, yada. For about 2 grand, you can be on that list. So everyone listening, be wary of that. That's
Mm.
insider baseball. A new graduate, no shame, but a new graduate a month ago could scrape up 1,500 bucks and on one of those websites appear as an expert. So I would look into who's teaching us, me being one of those people, and that'll kind of tell you who maybe you need to go to.
Mm. Another person is asking, can someone be added as title holder to transfer without taxes at death?
Yes. Here's the problem with that, though, right? We're talking about that stepped up basis. If you make them, um, you're probably talking joint tenant with right of survivorship, right? Where when you're gone, it automatically becomes theirs. Totally. No probate needed, no fees needed, but kind of like the trust transfer, if you add them to the title, they don't get the step up in basis. So if it's your home and they're going to live there forever, maybe it's not a huge deal. Their estate will pay taxes in 40 years when they die. And sure, it'll be a crazy high bill, but who cares? Right. And if they do it to their kid, it just never comes on. Right. Um, so you can, but if you're trying to get around probate with that and you know they live 2 states away and they're just going to turn around and sell it, you have to do some math. Is the 2% of an estate going to be more or less than if I just put them on there with capital gains? It's probably, the capital gains percentage is higher. It's probably more beneficial to just leave them off and give them the step up in basis. But again, it depends on what's the value of the asset.
Okay. We've got, bear with me, this is kind of a long question, but the person is saying that they're a beginning farmer and they've gotten a quote to set up a structure or trust at $5,000 and tax returns are around 500 to 700 per entity. But they're saying, based on the discussion here today, it looks like that having at least three entities would be the tax slash liability optimum. And their household net worth is less than 1 million. So it seems like a lot of money while they're still trying to build working capital. Um,
Yes. So I mean, you hit the head nail on the head, Will. You're in a bit of a predicament there. So generally, I will say most farmers today, okay, um, have your operating LLC, like you're talking about, and you have a trust generally for the land assets. A lot of people are still keeping the land assets out of the LLC because uh, if the business goes under, Will, right? you can declare bankruptcy, offload the equipment and everything. Well, the land doesn't belong to the business, right? The business is renting from the trust, right? So we have those two different silos right there. And then you have your operating LLC outside of your equipment as well. You usually have your equipment and other assets in its own. That seems to be the best for liability. Um, and I'm an estate planning, and believe it or not, tend to be more of the property lawyer. Our director, Christine, I may actually give you her email. She is one of the preeminent people on tax law specifically, where she can probably better break down for you the benefit under that $1 million mark or not, whether you need three or if you're fine with two, or what is that going to look like? Because again, you can still own them as personal assets for now without spending that capital, which I'm assuming you're doing with different things, right? So I think in the long term, Will, if you can come up with the money for especially liability optimum, like you're saying, you do want as many silos there as possible. I would venture to say, though, right, that your operating is probably the most important right now because that's going to be the most fluid as a beginning farmer, with success or fail, right? You're operating and your equipment LLCs, I would probably prioritize first, assuming you probably don't have a ton of land anyway with your asset valuation there. I would focus on getting those two LLCs to maximize your money maybe right now, even before um, a trust specifically. Now, it sounds like for 5K, you're getting a whole, like what I'll call suite, where they're doing all of this for you. That seems like a pretty market price to do all that for you. So I hope I answered that question.
All right, perfect. I think we've gotten through most of the questions. So, thank you everyone for attending. Again, this will be recorded. It'll be published on our website or our YouTube this afternoon. So if you want to look back through the presentation, pause it at certain points. Um, there at the beginning, yes, you can find Mason's email if you want to reach out to him or anyone else on with the Center for Ag Law and Taxation. So, with that, I'll give you any final thoughts, Mason.
Yeah, hold on. I'm John. I got your email in here. I have copied and pasted it into a Word doc before this chat goes away. So I will email you. Let me copy your question. I probably need that with your email as well. I'm filibustering here. Sorry to the whole audience. Yeah, so the big thing, guys, here, honestly, is there are so many different ways to do it, and so many that are good for others, bad for some, right? So I think I put in that quote in the little presser. The only wrong thing to do is nothing. Get that team, like I emphasized at the beginning, right? And I'm talking to where the questions are because I'm making sure none other come in. I apologize. Get that team we talked about. Get a lawyer you trust, get a CPA you trust that knows what they're doing, a financial advisor, whether that just be the Edward Jones guy down the street who's been at it for 20 years, or if it's one of those, um, retirement groups of 20 guys who are independent that sell services to everyone, kind of like an insurance, either or, right? Get a squad put all together to break down what's going to work for you personally. Uh, for the same person, you could have three different people with a net worth of 1 million, but their assets are all in different things and their answers are all different. A trust is good for one, no trust and just owning it personally is good for another. Dumping it into an LLC is great for the third. It just depends. And again, this is a general lecture. So please find that team. If you need help finding a team, reach out to us. And then if you have any other general questions, please, I mean, that's what we're here for. We're a free resource through the extension. The last plug I'll make is, and then I promise I'll release you all. I don't know how to get to the beginning of my slideshow. We're going to click escape. Here is what we're going to do. You saw it as a placeholder picture in here, okay? This estate and succession planning book, all right? To plug our stuff, but it is really good info. it is $15 from the ISU extension website. So your money will go back into the extension for things like this, and extension budget cord, anything the extension offers. Okay, and for 15 bucks, they'll mail you this copy. It goes more in depth about everything I talked about today than I could, and I could talk for another 2 hours and you'd all get bored of me. You'd rather read it from there. It has helpful things like checklist in it as well, so you know you've called everybody and you've hit everything you need to hit. So I would suggest that as well if you're really starting from square one. And it'll help you too as you hire people to, are they checking the boxes in this book? Do they know what they're doing?
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you for that. I'm sure you'll get some emails after this webinar. And thanks everyone for joining us.